Hey everybody, welcome to Faith and Culture. And we're diving into the issues in our culture and how we deal with those and really how our faith integrates with that. And so we're going to have various guests on the show over time, and we're really trying to dive into this idea of, one, their story. One, we want to hear interesting stories. We want to hear people's lives and how they've gone into the culture and been successful and really integrated their faith into their life in so many different ways. As we talked about at Skyline Church especially, we talk about having a faith that's 7 days a week. And so that means we don't compartmentalize it. And so during this show, what we're doing is, of course, we're tackling those issues. We're not running away from culture. We're bringing our faith into culture. And today, my guest is none other than Bob Taylor. Taylor Guitars, for one, among other things. And Bob, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Pastor.
Appreciate that. And so we're going to jump in and just kind of talk a little bit about your life, and really starting with where you grew up and kind of tell us about your family, upbringing, and then how you came to faith.
Well, okay. I grew up mostly in San Diego. My mom and dad are from Montana, and they were married in Missoula. And my dad joined the Navy, needed a job. I was a couple of years old at the time, and no, I wasn't. I was a couple of years old when he rejoined the Navy. I was born in Oakland when he was in the Navy. He stayed in for 2 years, and then he got out, moved to Bozeman, spent a year there, and he's like, no, I needed that job. So we moved back. We came to San Diego. I spent my kindergarten, first grade years down on right up by Gompers Junior High, right off of Euclid and 94. That's where we lived. Wow. And we moved to Virginia for a couple of years and came back to San Diego when I was in the 4th grade, and I've been here ever since. So I call myself a San Diegan.
Yeah, for sure. That makes you.
Yeah, and my parents were Christians. Our family is Christian. Mm-hmm. Kind of as far as the eye can see. It's interesting. It's a little bit different story than a lot of people who came to faith, came to God, came to Christ, really through a difficult situation. Yeah. But our situation was, that was our culture. It was our life. Mm-hmm. It really was. And it's kind of funny because my dad's passed away. My mom's still alive. She turns 90 on the 11th of next month, one more month away. But I'd always felt like a Montanan because my dad felt like he was a fish out of water, no pun intended, in the Navy down here. And so he retired from the Navy on July 4th, 1972. He called it Independence Day. And they were in their car an hour later, driving to Spokane, Washington. So my parents abandoned me, and I was down here and was 18 years old, I guess, and I started making guitars at this little shop called the American Dream.
So, as a family, it was something you grew up with, going to church. Would you say you guys were churchgoers, you're saying, or was it more Christmas, Easter? What was it like?
Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and whatever in between.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Assemblies of God.
Okay.
And my church experience growing up was in Claremont, a little church called Claremont Assembly of God. Okay. And that's where we went. And we went to church. When we lived in Virginia, I was in 2nd and 3rd grade, and I don't really remember that much about it. I can't put a place to it, But we were super involved.
Awesome. And then so you grew up in the church, and then so your parents leave, and you start at this guitar shop. At that point, your faith, if it hadn't been already, it became your own or needed to become your own at that point. Were you going to church, or was there, like a story of so many people, there was a time where you drifted away from your relationship with the Lord or church or anything of that during that time?
Not for a minute.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Maybe sometimes inside I drifted away.
Sure.
But my legs took me to church.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes that's what gets you through.
Amen.
Sometimes it's the promise you make or the habits that you do that get you through. Yeah. But I was a clean-cut kid, didn't get in trouble, and I went to church. And I continued that church. We started a small Christian band at the church that I was attending, Claremont Assembly, the people that I went to church with, and we played around San Diego and a little bit outside of San Diego, but we played a lot. And we wrote music, played it, and gosh, just before we started growing up and had to quit, people were getting married and that kind of things. We were playing 20 times a month at churches around here. It was,
Okay.
yeah. So I was living, you grow up playing guitar, you want to play, there's nothing better than gear, equipment, PAs, wheeling all that in and wheeling it all out. It's a hobby and a love. I don't want to do that right now.
Yeah.
But we did that all the time. So I was involved in church. I worked on guitars and I went to church. Those are the two things I did in my life.
Did you teach yourself how to play guitar?
Yeah,
How did
not
that
very
come
well.
about? Okay.
I'm not a good guitar player.
Okay.
And by the way, I played guitar here at Skyline for 2.5 decades. And finally it was time to step down. And man, the people who play now, they're so good.
That's awesome.
I love listening to our worship band.
Yeah.
They're so good. And even a rotation of people, the music here is really good.
Yeah, amen. That's awesome.
You can bring somebody
Yeah,
and you can be proud,
that's great.
which
to
is a
hear.
really cool thing.
That is so good.
Yeah.
So you are, you're interested, obviously, you're playing guitar, but what got you into building them? So you went to work at that shop, or you went to build guitars at that shop? Like, what was the initial job there?
Well, let me back up. I tried making a guitar when I was 12. I was too young. I couldn't finish it.
Okay.
And then 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, I was in San Diego City schools, not the county schools. We had junior high and high school, not middle school and high school.
Yeah.
So it was 3 years of junior high, and I had like the best teacher ever in metal shop, Ernest Labastida, a man who poured his life into me, come in on Saturdays and open up that shop, teach me how to do things. I loved that guy. He was great. He's still alive today. I've seen him. And, well, he put time into me because I was actually freakishly good at making things.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. So it was a symbiotic relationship. Man, I lapped it up from him, and he loved helping.
Yeah.
Because he's not, a lot of times shop classes where somebody went to bide time, but I was industrious. And I got into high school, continued taking shop classes we don't have anymore.
Yeah.
That's another topic.
Yep.
But if it hadn't been for those, I don't know that I'd be a guitar builder. A white collar professional path for me would have been the kiss of death. Really would, man.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. In fact, I got out of high school, rode my motorcycle midsummer to Mesa Community College, got off, parked it, walked up to where you register, got in the line and said, I can't do this. And I turned around and I walked away. Wow. It's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. Yeah. And so then in high school, I was taking more classes and I needed a guitar. I wanted a guitar. I'd seen a 12-string guitar music store downtown called Apex Music. If you've been around here for a long time, you might remember that store. There's 3 or 4 of them. And I thought, I can't afford to buy one, I can build one. And so then I started. And my teacher was Larry Kaiser. And you know the Lurcooks, Russ and Dottie. Turns out, all these years later, he was neighbors with them for forever. And I just went to his 90th birthday party this last year.
That's amazing.
It's fantastic. Yeah. So to be in touch with these guys, he helped me. He helped me by letting me. That's how he helped me.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you're working in the shop and really being mentored as well. And how does it go to that next level? At what point is it I'm starting to do?
Well, along the way, I learned that I had to buy some supplies to make a guitar. And I discovered this little place in Lemon Grove called the American Dream Music, and they made guitars. And I went there and I bought some stuff. And I'm 16 years old. And the guy who ran it, his name was Sam Radding. He might have been the original hippie at San Diego State. And that guy can make things. It's really good. To this day, Sam can make things. He knows how to make things. And he took a shine to me. Same thing back. At this point, I'm 18 years old, about to graduate, and I asked if there was a possibility that I could work this. This is a little tiny shop in Lemon Grove, and right off of Main Street. And I hung out long enough to where I was welcome. And it wasn't formal employment. Make a guitar, you have to pay some money to the shop, and you get to keep some money. And it was kind of a commune sort of a thing. And I showed up, and there was a cast of characters there. But I was the pure white T-shirt, clean cut kid that didn't cuss or drink or smoke. And I made guitars, and people were like, "Who's that guy over there? Keeps churning out guitars," you know. So there was a couple times during that time that I went out to play music with people I met, and the next thing you know, the pot came out, and I just slinked out, and just disappeared. They didn't even know that I had gone.
Yeah.
Until later. I was really uncomfortable in those situations because of my upbringing and my beliefs. Yeah. And then one day Sam decided to sell. He wanted to get out of it.
And how long were you working there at that point when he decided
Less
to
than
sell?
a year.
Less than a year?
Less than a year.
Okay.
And there was a...
You're 19 or so, 18 you're saying at that point? Or you?
I started when I was 18. I transitioned to be 19. And I turned, my 68th birthday will be March 12th. So we have 2 shopping months left from the time that we are recording this. Yeah. At any rate, so March I turned 19, and by October I had partnered up with 2 guys that worked there, and we bought the place. 8 years later, one of those 2 guys and I bought out the third partner, and Kurt Listug is his name. We're still partners today. Mm-hmm. And Kurt became my partner because his dad asked him, "Hey, before I loan you money to buy this little shop, do you know how to make guitars?" Kurt said, "No, not really." "Well, who does?" "Well, this kid, Bob Taylor, knows how to do it." "Well, get him to be your partner, and I'll loan you the money." So we pitched in money. We came up with $10,000. We paid Sam $3,000. We took over this little tiny shop, took over the rent. That building is still there today. And we're in business.
That's amazing because, 19 years old, you're a business owner, just like that. And so now that, to me, would be an easy time to say, I'm going to focus on my business now. I'm going to be here all the time doing this, and I'm sure you worked your tail off. But you still had the faith element. You weren't giving that up. You obviously were, during all those times, as you mentioned, there was some, whether it was pot or probably drinking, probably everything else going on, especially when we're talking about the music industry and even locally. And so at what point did you find Skyline Church? Because I'm thinking, okay, so the shop's in Lemon Grove, so that's probably not too far from the original campus. And so how did that all come about, going to Skyline?
Well, during those first couple of years, we still had our group called Wings of Faith, and we were playing. So that 20 times a month, I was playing during the same time I was building those guitars, still going to Claremont Assembly of God. It was my home. My parents had left. I wasn't married. I didn't have a girlfriend, but I was there. I lived in Claremont, and I drove out here. My best friend and my other best friend, Marla and Steve, got married, and they got a home out here in Lemon Grove. They were married 2 days when I asked if I could move in with them, and it's like I can't afford the gas to drive from Claremont, and so I took a room in their place, and and I was blocks away from where I was working, and my life was church and work, playing music at churches, attending. There was never a drift. And then Cindy and I, my wife Cindy, we...
At what point did you meet?
Well, I was 20-something. Her father was an Assemblies of God pastor in Spokane, Washington, where my parents had moved.
Okay.
And her father was... My grandfather and grandmother on my mom's side lived across the street from that church. So Pastor Rich, Cindy's dad, was best friends with my grandfather and my grandmother. My grandpa was retired by then and went over to the church and helped, and they were coffee buddies. And so we'd go up there on vacation. I went up on vacation when my folks lived there, and I met Cindy when I was there. She was going to Evangel College in Springfield, Missouri. Her dad ended up coming down and became pastor of La Mesa Assemblies of God over there in Jackson.
Yeah.
So he was pastor there. She came home from church, or came home from school, graduated, and one thing led to another, and I called her up and asked her if I could take her on a date to a free concert. And it was the Archers, which was, they were a band, a Christian band from back in the Maranatha days. Okay, so we went to, I don't know, it could have been Faith Chapel. I think it was Faith Chapel.
Oh, yeah.
We went there, we went to that concert. 6 months later, we were married. And so then we started our life. Her father finally left the pastorate after many, many years, got a PhD in psychology, moved to Denver. And during that transition, we came to Skyline. I used to come to Skyline for youth events. We would get on a bus in Claremont and drive to the ends of the world.
Yeah.
And we'd end up on Skyline Drive, and we'd be in what they called the center, the building that's down below the center. And the sanctuary had been built a few years earlier than that. I didn't know that until later. But it was time for Cindy and I to separate from there, have our own place. Being a pastor's family isn't the easiest thing in the world. There's complications. You know that. And so we thought, hey, it's time to break away and go be just ourselves. So we went to Skyline. We met people. A man named Dick Barnes, they were great members of that church, was our adult Sunday school teacher. Then Russ and Dottie Lurcook were our next Sunday school teacher for years. Pastor Butcher was there.
Wow.
And
was
then
he still senior pastor at that point?
He was senior pastor.
Yeah, so this is, is this 70s, 80s? Where are you at right now?
We were married in 77, so it was
so late
78 that we were there.
70s, yeah.
I can't remember what year he left. I don't remember time in years. But then John came. John dedicated my oldest daughter, Minnie. And Dan Ryland and Tim Elmore, that whole group.
Yeah.
They were there, and they were our peers.
With John Maxwell, did you understand early on his leadership gifting? Or was that something that you saw year in year he was building and building and building?
Year in year I saw it.
Yeah.
At first he was our pastor. Great speaker. John's the kind of guy that when he comes to the pulpit, you're like, okay, Dad's home.
Yeah.
We feel comfortable. When you watch a figure skater and you're nervous the whole entire time because you're just afraid they're going to fall.
Yes.
Or you see someone who really shouldn't be singing a solo, sing one, and you're nervous. Well, some speakers are that way too.
Yeah, it's true.
John's not that way. Yeah. You're not that way.
No. I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah. So I eventually was on the board. Eventually became vice chairman of the board, and then I was in charge of the search for Jim, for Pastor Garlow.
Okay, yeah.
Except I was in charge of it by position, not by ability. And I knew that I didn't have the ability. And when you say you can't do something, yeah, you can. It's like, if I said I can't go 250 pull-ups right now, would you believe me? They look at me, yeah, I believe that. Okay, well, let me tell you, I'm not the person to actually do the search.
Wow.
But we had a fellow on our board named Don Mosier, and he was the person. And I asked him if he would be the person to do that. Had my full support, had my advice,
Yeah.
We could be a team, but I could tell by looking around the room, he's the guy, and he did. And for all you people out there in church land. That's not an easy thing to do. And it can change you. And if you think that there's no struggle in a church, there is. So I said, Don, you can do this, but I want to warn you, it might change you. And in the end, it did. It was a huge, huge, huge burden to come to that decision. Didn't change him for the worst, but it was something that allowed him to rethink where, I mean, he ended up going to a different church and finding a nice home there, and everything's fine with his life, but those things can take it out of you. And I knew that it not only would it take it out of me, but I would not do a good job. But when it came down to the very, very, very end, and it kind of got handed back to me, I could tell Jim was the guy. We have an incredible church here when you think of our decades history. 68 years and 4 pastors. Okay.
Unheard of. Really.
Unheard of.
Truly. And we talk about it on staff time to time, just the miracle on the mountain even. And you were involved in that process.
I was there.
You think about the hurdles that had to be overcome to get this church to this spot. It's amazing.
I was thinking about that when I drove through the parking lot, because I came westbound from, Rancho San Diego. And I came in, and just the parking lot drive up by the sheriff's station, all the way through, and then to come up here, that's a long drive when you think about it. That's a lot of pavement. That's a lot of road. That's a lot of grading. There's trees that are rolled. The buildings that are here. Everything that's there, it's done. And what we have left to do is easier because it's done.
Totally.
It's done.
Done. Yeah, that's 100%. I mean, I think back on even those days of listening to Jim talk about some of those battles, and even the boulders. How many boulders had to be removed?
Blue granite.
Blasted, the blue granite that had to.
The neighbors that didn't want it.
Yeah.
They put up pictures of the mountain and then superimposed aircraft carriers on it to go to the town council meetings, the Valle d'Oro meetings, say, this is what it's going to look like. Do you want an aircraft carrier? I mean, it's...
And when you think about it, I mean, obviously, whatever it was with people in terms of, we have battles with environmentalists, and we all know people don't want any building, so many people in San Diego. But yet, at the same time, there's an enemy that was pushing against the whole time. They didn't want to see the kind of fruit that's happening. They didn't want to see the kind of lives that would be making decisions for Christ. And so it certainly was quite the incredible spiritual battle. I think back, I heard a story, and you would have been there. So I'm going to ask you this question. I heard a story about the board at that time. The property down where Target was available. And everyone's like, that's it. Like, it's right there. And someone said, no, the mountain. And it ended up being the mountain. Do you remember that? Was that a true story, or how that even came about?
It's a true story, but it wasn't like somebody said it and it became that. It's more nuanced than that. Like, can we get permits for that? Are they going to let us do it? The zoning on that. I think we had to take the more difficult piece, and it was way more difficult than we thought. We were on Skyline Drive in Lemon Grove at the time. This looked pretty amazing, and I mean, we didn't know what we were doing. Who does? We're not developers.
Right.
We're a church. We're not developers. And this isn't Georgia, where you could go buy another 40 acres of flat ground in Iowa. I mean, it could be real envious of people's facilities when you go around the flat part of the world that doesn't have Mexico on one side, a desert on the other, Camp Pendleton on the other, and an ocean on the other, and you're boxed in, and it's all hills. Right? And then you go someplace where it's just flat, and people, we have 160 acres. We bought it for a song, and we're getting ready to do our next building, and their building department's easy. And it's like, well, we got what we have, but it was hard won. And again, I can think about I'm going to say Russ and Dottie one more time. Sorry,
Yeah,
because they're still
incredible.
alive and there. Norma Suchecki's down there.
Yep.
The Millers finally left. They had to go because of health reasons and get up to Spokane and live with their son, Dan. But these are people that really built that, and they're still here. Imagine being in your mid-80s, and you're listening to this worship team today, and you went through every music change that makes people cranky, and you're still here and you're still faithful. It's the mark of Skyline. Skyline doesn't have grumpy people, and if they don't, if they do, they have a hard time putting a band together of other grumpy people.
Yeah, very true.
There's something about that. God must have set that in place with Orville Butcher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how things are started, the foundation that was built, and
Yeah.
all of that is something that we talk about quite a bit, that we get to bear some fruit from all the labor and all the hard work to get the church to where it is.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean you're not doing hard work.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you don't have your own
Mm-hmm.
mountains to climb. Sometimes the choices in a day is like, which one of these not good choices am I going to take? Right? And especially if the answer is procrastination, and you know that, I like to say you're not going to get anything done unless you're willing to start before you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have another saying: anything worth doing is worth doing poorly.
Yeah.
Right? And you're not going to be good at everything that you do.
Yep.
Until you do it, gain some experience, get better at it. And so I think it's a joy to have been here, stay here, through the changes, through the ups and the downs. If I were to say something to people who are listening, church hopping, I remember when Maxwell said something, "Oh, Pastor, I don't feel like I'm getting fed." He's like, "Getting fed? You're fed way beyond your level of obedience.
Yeah.
I don't need to feed you more."
That's right.
Right? And I know that people need to find another environment sometime for some reasons, but stick it out.
Yeah.
Because life is like this. It's not always exactly what you want on the menu every time you come to the table.
Yeah. Yep. That is a good point.
Yeah.
And so you're on the board, you're doing these things with the church, but yet now you also, let's go back a little farther and say, okay, now this business that you have is starting to, what is it, growing? Is it, when do you decide to say it's going to be Taylor Guitars, or I'm going to start Taylor Guitars, or we're going to make this into, how did it all come about?
Well, me and Kurt and Steve bought that little shop from Sam, and the next day we were in business. And the next day we had no money. And the next day we were buried in a flood. It rained and our shop was flooded out. And then it was 8 years of literally, I'd see an SDG, an E-truck going down the street in front of us, like he's going to turn our gas off. I just know he's going to turn our gas off. And struggle, no money. Luckily, Cindy had a job as a teacher. By the way, all you people out there, she made $9,000 a year that year,
Yeah.
But we found a little house in Lemon Grove to buy for $15,000, believe it or not.
Wow.
And we lived there, came to Skyline. She worked. I made guitars. I didn't make any money. And somewhere 6-7 years, we started paying ourselves a little bit. Our first paychecks were after I sat down with Steve and Kurt and said, "I'm tired of not getting paid. It's a bad habit.
Yeah.
It's a bad habit to not do that," right? And I said, so we need to get paid every Friday. Don't care what the amount is. So we did our ciphering, and we came up with $15 a week. That's what we could pay ourselves. And I go, okay, well, I want my $15. I said, we have to develop the habit of including us in that. So we started making $15 a week. And then we said, oh, we're going to give ourselves a $5 a week raise. Every week, we worked our way up to $85 a week, and we sat there for 3 or 4 years. And sometimes we didn't cash the checks. But eventually, after some years of Kurt driving around the country with a couple of guitar samples in his Volvo and walking into music stores, cold calling, saying, hey, we make these guitars back here. And me back at the shop making guitars, him and I talking on the telephone. Sometimes he'd go, I'm thinking of coming back. I go, don't, there's nothing to come back to. Don't come back.
Find another music store.
Yeah. It's Thanksgiving. Go get some turkey down at the restaurant next to Holiday Inn, watch a football game, and sell some more guitars. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So that's what we did. And somewhere around year 10, 11, 12, things started to
10, 11, 12.
They started to take root. We started making some guitars. We made a little bit of money. I remember the first day, as clear as could be, that I went home on a Friday. It was the summer, so it was light out, and I closed up the shop, and I felt like all my work was done for that week. That was 12 years into it, 11 years into it. I said, I'm going home, and I feel like I got my work done.
Yeah. What is, when you look at that, right? Because I love talking to entrepreneurs, and there's always the perseverance story and all that. But what is for you? What kept you going that long? You're not getting
embarrassment.
Really? Explain that.
Every time I thought about quitting, a little movie reel would come up in my mind of me running into somebody at the grocery store that I haven't seen for 3 years, and them saying, so how's that guitar thing going? And me saying, well, I had to quit that. And I just would get back to work. Wow. I can't tell you how many times that happened.
That's interesting, because that reminds me of some of the athletes. When you're an athlete, some people are motivated for the win, but a lot of them are fearful of the loss. Mm-hmm. And it's, I don't want to lose. Mm-hmm. I'm fearful that my lack of preparation, if I didn't prepare enough, is going to be embarrassing. Mm-hmm. And it just goes along a little bit with what you're saying there, is that idea of I didn't want to be embarrassed. And so you kept going, but there's also a passion. There had to be something you liked about it, right? To explain that, was there something that you really you had to enjoy it at some level? No.
If you don't like the chop wood, carry water part of your job, I feel bad.
It's a pretty good book. Have you read that book?
No.
Have you heard of that? Yeah.
No.
It's a good book.
But every job is mostly work. Yeah. Every job is mostly work. If there's some glamorous moments in that job, here and there, the rest of the time in between it is work. And I love the work. I like to make guitars. People say, what would you do if you didn't make guitars? I go, easy. I'd make guitars. It's what I do.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure this out. Because I guess I was made, I felt that way.
Yeah.
The same thing as someone would have maybe as a calling, to do something. It's like what I felt it was a good way to spend the culmination of my talents that I'd been given by God. Those are God-given talents. You have to develop them.
Sure.
Don't go be lazy about that. Yeah. But you realize that you have a talent, lean into that.
So let's say you're 10, 12 years in, you're starting to see, this is going to make it, or at least it's making it right now. Take me to that next step where almost like the flywheel principle in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. It's years and years of this flywheel push, but then all of a sudden it starts taking on its own momentum and gains that momentum. At what years did you start to notice, Taylor guitars are starting to get noticed more and more?
Yeah, my father-in-law, who died young at 52 years of age, but he used to say, nothing succeeds like success, And I always say, you have to be famous to be famous. You got to crawl your way into being noticed. And we were selling guitars to dealers, and they liked them, and they struggled to sell them. But we had what we called dealers that would pioneer our line. These were guys that didn't want to sell what everybody else was selling, wanted to take a little bit of time to show somebody something they liked. And we had those guys on our side, and we were figuring out how to make profit, because it's really easy to make a guitar and spend more money making it than you can sell it for. And that was my job. Kurt's job was telling me whether we're making profit or not, and figuring out the sales, the marketing. He became an incredible accountant, finance guy. We both got good at the two things we added to the business. And I would say that there were several points along the way where I thought, well, this might work. Usually the way I express it is, guess I'm not going to go out of business this week, you know. And those things happen all the way till today. COVID hits, something happens. COVID ends, something else happens. And there's ups and there's downs and there's surprises, and that your ability to spin, turn, change. I always say, you want to get in for more, you want to get out for less. Everyone's trying to get out for less. Let's get in for more. So usually when things get bad, we get in for more, you know, and our dealers figure that out. So what I've gotten out of it now is way, way beyond what I ever would have dreamed back then, but it's not beyond what I would have dreamed 5 years ago. Do you know what I mean? You climb a mountain. These analogies are, you know, everyone uses them. But then you can see. But there's something in the way. You got to get over there to see a little bit more before you arrive at the ocean. And then, like George Carlin said, now you got to build a pier to get out there a little bit, because you're just not quite satisfied. You know, got to walk out another couple hundred yards, and then get a boat and go to Hawaii. You know, but it just slowly grew. And good habits, good financial habits.
Like that would be tough. What does that look like? Good financial habits. When you're a growing business, it's easy to say, we're going to risk a lot so that we can get to the next level. But what's a good financial habit at that point?
Realize that profit is for the future. Try and get your profit enough to where you can save half of it. Well, you're going to pay taxes with half of it. The other half you save. Out of that, you can use some of it to build a fortress balance sheet, so to speak, you know, and then the other part you can invest to where you're, and then learn how to use financing properly, outside money properly. We have not always been a debt-free company, but we've always been a company that could pay off our debt, right? We could be debt-free, but we're using that money instead of this. If you're a business owner, keep your business separate from your personal. Keep it separate. Don't go using your business to buy things for you that you can't afford with the salary you're paying yourself. You know, those are some of the things that I could say.
There. I mean, that's really a nugget when you think about what you just said. Is we weren't always debt free, but we could always pay off our debt. That's just a great principle to keep in mind. As people in general, even.
Well, in business they call it CapEx, long-term capital debt. You should finance that. You know, you're going to pay those loans off in 5 years at the or 7 at the rate that the equipment that you buy, you know. And then we learned what to borrow money for and what not. For example, we don't own any buildings. That would have used up our capacity to grow our business, because we would have spent the money on buildings. So we let the building owners own the buildings. That was their business, and we would purchase, you know, leases from them, and we would work in there, and they're spending their money on that, and then short-term things like it's hard to borrow money against receivables or against cash flow or that kind of stuff, but it's easy to borrow money to buy machines that can help you. So get it in the right categories. These are all things Kurt figured out, and I learned from him.
Well, you have an incredible place there. As we toured that a couple years ago, I guess it has been now, but it absolutely blew me away to see the automation even that you have, even though you have a lot of hands-on things. And to kind of take me through that process when it's growing to the point where I can't build it myself all the time. I can't get a bunch of just people in here and we're just going to sit here and whittle out a guitar all the time. So what happens at that next level where you're like, we got to get some of these things to do part of the workforce, some of these machines you talk about, and we got to hire more people. And what does that look like in the middle of that growth? Because early on, you're hoping to sell a guitar, then you're hoping to sell a couple of guitars. At this point, when you need machines, how many guitars are you selling? In terms of, I don't know if
Well, let me explain this.
Yeah.
I started early because when all my years in junior high and high school, I had to make some tools, jigs, fixtures to make the things that I made. And anyways, I learned a lot from those guys. Those two teachers. So in the early days, the first 7, 8 years, I say I worked 2 days a day. I made guitars for a day, and then I went home and had dinner, and I came back and I made tools for a day. Because to me, I didn't want my life to be Groundhog's Day. Wake up every day and have to do that stupid thing all over again. I wanted to make it easier for the next time, and I dedicated myself. This was at the time when I'm married. I'm no longer in our group we called Wings of Faith. That had disbanded. I wasn't going to Claremont Assembly of God anymore. I was married and going to Skyline Church. We never missed church, and even Skyline in those days had Sunday night services, Wednesday night activities, and we would go to those things. So I started making stuff. I've been known in my peer group, my generation of guitar builders around the world. We're all good friends. We all know each other because nobody understands what you do as a guitar maker except another guitar maker. It's really hard to explain what you do because nobody knows one. I'm the only guitar maker that most people know, right? And so I started doing that. So my machines would get more complicated, more complicated, more complicated. There was a time when I needed some more girth, things with motors on them, and I couldn't afford to buy them. And Mount Miguel High School had night classes, and a really great teacher named Steve Shoemaker. His wife, Joan Shoemaker, was the mayor of El Cajon for some time. Maybe I guess it was Mark Lewis before Bill, and Joan Shoemaker before Mark.
Oh, wow.
Right. That was after he'd already retired, but he ran this shop. He had an incredible shop. And I went down there at night school, and I started welding and cutting and doing all the things that I learned in junior high school from Mr. Lavastida, and building machines from the ground up to do a this or a that or another thing. Then I had a lot of dedicated machines. In 1989, I had a friend who makes guitars in Newberry Park up by Thousand Oaks. His name's Tom Anderson. He makes electric guitars. He's like, I want to come down and see your shop. I've heard so many great things about it. He came down. We were in our second location. We moved out of Lemon Grove. We were in Santee, giving him a tour. We came across this machine that did a thing. And it came from an old guitar factory. And I found it. It was a piece of junk, and I rebuilt it, and I was using it. It cut the fret slots for guitars, 20 of them at a time. I was pretty proud of that thing. And I asked Tom, he's like, that's pretty cool. I go, how do you do it? And he said, well, I have this CNC mill. CNC means it's controlled by a computer numerically controlled. And that wasn't really available in the 70s and the early 80s. But the same thing that the PC, the IBM AT, the same thing that made you do desktop publishing can make you do desktop guitar making. The same thing. That computer can drive this machine the same way it can drive a printer, right? And he said, I have this CNC machine. And I was like, tour's over. We're going to your place. And literally the next day or the day after, I was up there looking at this thing, and I go, what is this? I didn't know it was available. And he goes, well, my friend Dave Schechter, who I worked for at Schechter Guitars, when that place closed down, I started winding scatterwound pickups on my dining room table, my kitchen table, to make a living, pickups for guitars, and then I eventually got to this. And Dave went to work for this company called FADAL, which is an acronym for Fred, Al, Dave, and Larry, and they started making the CNC machines. And he called me up one day and he said, Tom, I'm selling the machine that I would make if I was going to make a machine to make a guitar. And Tom said, I have to see one. So Tom bought one.
Wow.
And I had one within a couple of months. Kurt arranged the financing, the lease financing for $100 and some thousand purchase when we were young, and this was 89. And that was more money in 80. You can buy them for less than that now. Wow. You know, they're so prolific. And I remember asking the machinery salesman, I said, I can't believe you're giving me this lease. He goes, well, the only question that we have when we lease something like that is how soon are you buying the next one? Because you're never going back.
Yeah.
And I never did go back.
Wow.
And so we got into that technology, and there's still so much handwork and there's dedicated things we make, but we started getting into computer-driven machines that can do the things that we did by hand, mostly shaping a part.
What that level did that take you to, from how many guitars to how many guitars once you got the automation in?
Well, it's more than that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I guess we were making 8 guitars a day when I bought that. And during the height of COVID, when demand was really high, we were making 1,000 guitars a day.
Yeah.
That's a big difference.
That's a whole nother topic, COVID, right? COVID, the business picked up.
First it crashed. Everything was closed. It was a ghost town. Nobody knew what was going on. We were all afraid. We were afraid. The first person I heard of to die, and one of the first people that did die, is an ex-Skyliner named Gary Bunzer. And he lived in Seattle. And if you go on YouTube and go for the RV Doctor, he has a YouTube channel. That's Gary Bunzer. And he died right off the bat. And then the next person that I knew that died worked for us. He was our security officer. So everyone was scared.
Yeah.
And things closed down. And it's like, this can't stay closed down. It wasn't closed down in Tecate. We have a huge factory in Tecate. We have a huge factory here. This one closed down. Next thing you know, there's 15 of us there around a ghost town. And it's like, well, so this is what it feels like to lose everything you've worked for your whole entire life. Now I know what that feels like. You know, I've driven off a cliff before, and I thought, this is what it feels like to die in a crash. You know, you have that.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't die, and I didn't go out of business. I kind of know what it feels like, you know, when you're faced with that, you know. And I called Bill Wells, our mayor, and I said, Bill, I don't really get this being closed down thing. And he's like, you're not the droid we're looking for. And he's like, this is our city. Open back up, open slowly, do it at the pace that you want to do. Now remember, we started getting OSHA rules as fast as anything because they can use the bureaucracies to kind of enforce any law. You know, breaking an OSHA rule can ruin you. So we're very cautious about that. We opened slowly, and then as we started getting going, then the Tecate factory closed down. They came in with police tape. You got 12 hours to get out of here. If this place isn't empty, you're going to lose your maquila license. Wow. Well, we go, well, can we keep the pilot light on? We need we can't just let the oven, you know, so to speak, cool down. They're like, okay, you can have 2 people here that do that. Well, we can make masks for you guys. We have a whole sewing line. We'll make masks because we know that your hospitals don't have them. We started making masks, right, and giving them away. And one thing led to another, and it slowly crept back. And we went to 24/7 operation there so that we could take our people and divide the space. You know, people working here and here and there and there. And so the social distancing made people happy. And
because the demand had started to pick up, like, because people are at home. Some people are picking up guitar and starting to learn, because they're trying to kill their time and all that stuff. And so your demand is going crazy, right?
Yeah, and we got ourselves going again, but supply chain was messed up.
Yeah.
And containers went from $3,500 to get something from Europe, Africa, Asia to $15,000, $20,000 if you could get one. There were so many times that we'd spend a month just getting a container, 7 containers, 8 containers to be able to ship to our warehouse in Amsterdam. Every day took a miracle to find the things that we needed to make guitars. Like it was every single day. It's like, imagine, you know, that you make this microphone, but you can't get this screen.
Yeah.
And so you have a microphone with no screen, so you can't make it,
Yeah.
you know, or this cord's gone, or things with resin. So it was hard, but production problems are always easier to solve than sales problems. So we had sales. We provided stores with guitars. They sold everything they had in stock. We sold everything we had in stock. There were no guitars. And then 5/8 of the way through last year, boy, all of that just stopped. And we started, okay, well, we can build the stores need inventory. We need inventory. And then it's kind of like, you're driving along on the freeway and you see people up there and it seems to be slowing down. You're doing 75 and you're like, I guess it's time for me to stop right about now.
Yeah.
Whoa, boy,
Just
that
like
came
that.
up on me fast.
Yep.
So the end of this year was just the doldrums because people, and we knew that would happen. I knew that would happen, but I didn't know when it would happen. You don't know when it's going to happen. Sure. And so now right now we're living through a low sales period. I mean, we still sold a lot of guitars.
Yeah.
But you always set your budget for what you're doing. You have a good year, you hire some things, you take on some obligation, people get more money, and then you're fixed with a fixed overhead. Yeah. And you got to absorb that overhead. And but people right now, they're driving past the guitar store, straight to the airport, straight to the cruise line, straight to the convention. Imagine all the conventions that are happening around the world with 40, 50,000 people in them that didn't happen for 2 years.
Yeah.
Imagine all the concerts that didn't happen, all of the, I went up to see Zach Brown in Hollywood Bowl because I was in Panama when he was playing down here, and him and I are friends, and we hadn't seen each other for a while, so I went up there. Hollywood Bowl, all these people around, not a mask on, and I'm like, I don't even remember this. I don't even remember it.
Yeah.
That it was weird watching movies during the masked couple of years where you're like, those people aren't wearing a mask.
Yeah. It became such a part of our...
And now you see television shows that were made 2 years ago and they got a mask on.
Yeah.
But they're behind the times,
Yes.
So that was weird. Business is always hard, no matter how good it is. It's never a thing that lives on its own. You got to wake up every day.
Yeah, you go through the ups and downs you're talking about. There's peaks and then there's some valleys. And how do you lean on your faith in those times? Everybody is wonderful when everything's up and to the right, but that doesn't last. And so over time, you've had to endure some low times and some difficult times. And what is that? How have you relied on your faith during those times?
Takes a little experience.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to have. I think my faith is better with some experience, but Matthew 6 talks about, don't worry about today and tomorrow. God's going to provide what you need when you need it. And I've always learned that I get what I need when I need it. Yeah. Sometimes we get it way before, sometimes, but not always. And I've also learned that you don't need a lot of miracles, couple in a life. And I've had a couple in a life. Mm-hmm. I've had a couple things that can't be done. One of them is silly, and one of them is really important. Mm-hmm. But the silly one, it's a wonderful story. Want me to tell it?
Yeah, you mind sharing?
So we're coming home on vacation. I have daughters, they're this tall. And I always like to not go on vacation and then stop and do the long trudge home. We would usually stop and go to SeaWorld before we'd go to the home. We want to be on vacation until we get back to our door. Yeah. So we're coming along, and this was 30-some years ago. And I go, kids, you want to go to Disneyland? We're driving right by. And they're like, what? I'm like, we're going to go to Disneyland. And we go there. I got to see if I can get all of these things right. So we go there. I don't have cash to buy a ticket. I have a credit card. They don't take credit cards at Disneyland at the kiosk then. That ATM machine on the other side of the gate that you could go get cash and come out and buy it, they took personal checks and cash. Can you believe?
It's hard to remember.
Can you believe that? And so I don't have enough money to buy even one ticket to get in there. And my kids are standing there, my wife's there, and it's like, God, I need a ticket. I need a ticket to get, how can I get in there to get cash and come out and buy this thing. 2 seconds later, some lady walks up and goes, I have an extra ticket. Anybody need one? That's the silly one.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But I mean, and I don't count on silly ones, and I don't pray for a parking place unless someone's injured.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't play for my team to win. You know, I'm sure you do.
I have to.
Yeah, they need it.
Rarely won in the past, so yeah.
And then the really, really important one was Andy Powers, our successor, and that's a miracle because it can't be done.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that because here you are at the point you start looking for a successor. How long have you been in business?
35 years.
Okay, you're in business 35 years, and this is your baby. I mean, it's fair to say, you know, this is something that has been a part of you for so long that you're not just going to highest bidder, see you later. You've got to really steward this thing. And so you start praying for a successor, which in so many ways is a unicorn. You're praying for that unicorn. And so take me through that process. You're praying for a successor, and did you go through a bunch of different people, or did God kind of lay Andy on a platter for you? How did that work out?
I pulled out a pad. I don't save things. I wish I'd saved this. This is one thing I should have saved. I should have saved it, laminated it, put it in a frame, but I didn't. I pulled out a pad of paper. First, I talked with a fellow who worked for me named Larry Breedlove, who him and I were sort of a design team. He'd worked for me for a long time. We were good at designing things together. We had great. Have you ever worked with someone you can really work with?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Is that the most wonderful thing?
It's the best.
Yeah. They're like, Jeremy, I think that, and you don't get offended. Mm-hmm. Somebody else can say that, you might get offended.
Yep.
Right? Sure. Vice versa.
Yeah.
You
absolutely.
make it better together because there's good chemistry and it's just good. So him and I were like that. And I knew he was going to retire. Larry, when are you going to retire? I'm going to retire in 4 years. Okay. Oh, man. I started thinking, well, who can take his place? And I realized that I don't need somebody that worked for me to take his place. I need somebody who was originally born to originally do it. And so I just wrote, Dear God, I need one guitar maker who, is a good person, won't mess up their life, can make a long-time commitment, who knows the complete history of guitar that I don't know as far back as it goes, who is a pro player, can play with anybody on any stage at any time. 4, is self-taught, never worked for anybody else, never worked for another factory. 5, is less than 30 years old and has 20 years of experience.
Yeah, that's a unicorn, all right.
6 is from San Diego.
Wow.
There may have been another one. I can't think of it right now.
That's pretty specific. Yeah.
You don't put that on monster.com.
Yeah, right.
Or LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And then it's out there for 5 years.
Yeah.
But I thought about that list a lot. So one day we're at the NAMM show and Jason Mraz was playing at our booth. He was playing on our stage. And NAMM show is our trade show. Yeah. And I went back and we had a little green room. I went back to say hi to him. This kid's playing guitar with him. And he's like, hey, do you know Andy? And I go, no, it's Andy Powers. I'm like, hey, nice to meet you. Andy's dad was there. His name's Chuck. He goes, Bob, I'm Chuck, Andy's dad. We met you years ago when Andy was 17. We sat behind you at Maricosta College at a Harvey Reid concert, and Andy showed you a ukulele and asked you questions about it. He was 17 years old. I go, I remember you too. And I go, Andy Powers, Andy Powers. I go, Andy, you must be the guy, the Andy Powers that Kevin Kinnear talks about that makes these archtop guitars up in Oceanside. He goes, yeah, I guess I'm that Andy Powers. I go, cool, nice to meet you. So that passes. Then I go home. A week later, I go, Andy Powers, Andy Powers, Andy Powers. He's 28 years old. He's married. He's got his first kid on the way. And I know another guitar maker who lives in Oceanside and surfs every day like Andy, and his name's Pepe Romero Jr., his father, Pepe Romero Sr., they're the Romero brothers. They're like the royal family of guitars. They live in Del Mar, and they're classical and flamenco players, and they're famous world around. And he works by himself. He's married, has a kid. And Andy and Pepe are both friends of mine, but they don't know each other. So I called them both, and I said, hey, I got a place up in Solana Beach. I want you two to meet each other because you could be friends. My best friends in life have been other guitar builders. So let's come and spend a day, if you guys would like to, with me at that place. It's beautiful. It's right on the ocean. And the rules are we each have to bring a guitar that we made. For me, that means a guitar that I made, not a guitar that my company made. So we did that. There's an archtop guitar that Andy brought, classical guitar that Pepe brought, a steel string guitar that I brought. We had a great time. I said, well, the reason I'm here is I'd like to help you guys. If there's anything you need, if I can help you with machines, if I can help you with anything, I'd love to be able to help you guys. Be cool if you're friends. And I'd learned about Andy during that 8 hours. And then another week later goes by, and I'm sitting at a stoplight, and that list comes up, and I'm like, check, 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 check. I learned that Andy was 28. He made his first guitar when he was 7.
Wow.
Been doing it ever since. The IRS caught up with him when he was 12, said, you're making too much money. You have to pay taxes. He's like, how do I do that? His dad said, figure it out. Yeah. He put himself through college fixing his music professor's guitars and all that stuff, UCSD, homeschooled kid. Went to college, got a music degree and a degree in composition and conducting and that kind of thing. Incredible player, could play with anyone. Famous people know who he is. His guitars are incredible. Best guitar maker. He's studied. He's every single thing that was there, and he's in San Diego. Wow. And he's half Taylor, just like me. People said, oh, because Andy Taylor Powers is his name, and that's his mom's side of the family.
Oh, wow.
And people go, wow, that's cool, he's half Taylor. I go, well, I'm half Taylor. Yeah. I'm no more Taylor than he is. and so I asked him to come down for lunch, and I said, Andy, can you name the guitar maker at? He's like, no. I go, yeah, they're corporations. Their guitars are made by a marketing, designed by they don't have a wellspring. I go, I can't have that at Taylor. And I just said, I'm not in the habit of telling somebody what they're born for. But I think you're the guy who should take over Taylor. And I said, I think I built a foundation that doesn't crumble, and I built a roof that doesn't leak. It's taken me my whole career. That's 40 years into it at that point. And you could do the inside. I'm kind of maybe you at Skyline, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Because we pretty much have a foundation that doesn't crumble and a roof that doesn't leak.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Parallels there, for sure. Yeah.
And so I said, we're driving home. I go, so what do you think? He goes, well, where I make guitars isn't the most important thing. It's like, if I could be the man God wants me to be, and the husband God wants me to be, where I make guitars. And so he thought about it. He's like, is someone going to get jealous? I go, they're not going to get jealous because they know they're not the person. And I did something in the business that I've never done before, ever. I sat down with my partner and my executive team, and I said, I'm making a decision. It's mine to make. It's not a vote. This is the one decision that I have to get right in my whole entire career, and I've made it, and it's right. And they're like, rock and roll, Bob. We trust you. So Andy came. Andy was unsure. He had a pretty good life.
Yeah.
He was making good money inside a garage and playing music halftime all over. And then he said, well, he had a few more questions. I go, look at it this way, Andy. You make about 12 guitars a year. You get a lot of money for them. You get a lot of money for them. So you're improving the musical experience of a dozen people a year. Or you could improve the musical experience of a couple 100,000 people a year and change the state of the art of what guitars are and will be. And that hit him. He's like, he's like, that's a better way to spend my talent.
Wow.
So he came. Now he's the president and CEO.
When you first said that to him, I can't imagine he thought that was coming, that you were going to say, take over, we want you to take over Taylor Guitar. So was he taken aback, or did he pass out? Like what was...
Andy's the most even-keeled person you'll ever... He collects data. If he can't say something nice, he won't say anything at all. He's very, very thoughtful, and he's learned not to speak until his thoughts are gathered.
To be processed.
Even he's got a couple tells that I've learned by watching him, but no, he's special.